Hello again, everybody. um, so, yes, our Thursday recording again. My weekly report. Um, we're in the middle of a series of talks on autism. Much of it is a repetition of something some of you have heard before, but from patient feedback, we know that there's still a big need for people to understand some of the basics. So we talked about in the first session on the lymphatic drainage. On the last session, we talked about the main toxin that is now associated with autism is no longer all the herbicides, insecticides, and all the chemicals, the wood preservatives and the phthalates and the blah, blah. They all play a role. There's no question. But the big single player that blocks everything is aluminum. Yeah? And so we will get a little bit more into that today, and then we move on to the next thing. But I wanted to insert like a little bit of COVID information. So there's a big misunderstanding out there. So first of all, when people are vaccinated, they have sections of the nucleotides of the DNA or RNA sequences of the virus is in the injection, but not the complete virus. And so the virus itself is not able to replicate in people. So there's a difference. The immune system in the individual patient responds as if it's a whole virus, and then does its instructions to keep manufacturing the spike protein for the rest of the life of the patient. And that hopefully sometimes the system understands it and clips it and stops it. And unfortunately, in many cases, about 1 in 6 or 1 in 5 people, it doesn't stop. It's an ongoing thing. And so we see now more and more people a year or a year and a half into the shot getting increasing problems, with clotting mostly and the myocarditis and all those things. But I just do want to say that people that had the vaccine, they're shedding all sorts of things, sections of the virus, but not the whole virus. But when you inhale that or get that, it still could trigger your immune response as if you had the virus. So it's a complex issue. The same is the case with people that have been through COVID and then they recovered, and then for many weeks or months, we don't know yet really, some of them seem to be contagious, but we don't know if it's sections of the DNA or if it's a spike protein or if it's a phthalate or is it the graphene oxide or is it the glyphosate in it or is it the adjuvants, aluminum and mercury and the usual culprits. We don't know yet because there's no serious research cannot get published, and so we're relying on our own. But the one thing that I want to say with long COVID, because long COVID is now becoming an increasingly visible problem. We talked about on this side, for a year and a half, but there's
Of the patient, and that hopefully sometimes the system understands it and clips it and stops it. And unfortunately, in many cases, about 1 in 6 or 1 in 5 people, it doesn't stop. It's an ongoing thing. And so you see now more and more people a year or a year and a half into the shot getting increasing problems, with clotting mostly and the myocarditis and all those things. But I just do want to say that people that had the vaccine, they're shedding all sorts of things, sections of the virus, but not the whole virus. But when you inhale that or get that, it still could trigger your immune response as if you had the virus. So it's a complex issue. The same is the case with people that have been through COVID and then they recovered, and then for many weeks or months, we don't know yet really, some of them seem to be contagious, but we don't know if it's sections of the DNA or if it's a spike protein or if it's a phthalate or is it the graphene oxide or is it the glyphosate in it or is it the adjuvants, aluminum and mercury and the usual culprits. We don't know yet because there's no serious research cannot get published. So we're relying on our own. But the one thing that I want to say with long COVID, because long COVID is now becoming an increasingly visible problem. We talked about on this side, for a year and a half, but there's everywhere shooting up. I'm sorry, I got some sunshine on my head, so which is kind of pleasant, but it's probably going to move any moment. So don't be irritated by that. So the main emerging treatment, and this is really an appeal to the physicians here, the main treatment modality that is successful is the antiretroviral treatment. And the main marker, as you probably know by now, but it's called, in the English literature, referred to as CCL5, but in the German literature, it's referred to as RANTES, RANTES. Now, RANTES is for many of you an old friend. Isn't that the one that's created or
associated with the cavitations in the lower jaw. Well, it was until a few months ago, and I actually was the first one in my autism talk, 2018 or 19 in Chicago, where I highlighted the fact that Rantes is a marker for retroviral activity and is not per se a marker for cavitations in the jaw. So Rantes, when it goes up, and it has gone up with many of you in the last year or so, that doesn't mean your cavitations are back. That's a mistake. I just want to warn our dentists of, when the Rantes goes up, it doesn't mean you have to go in and operate again. I've seen that mistake and that misinterpretation now through many phone calls and emails that I'm getting every day. And so please be aware of that. When Rantes goes up, you have long COVID. There's other markers. There's some interleukins and interferons. I will give you that whole picture like in a few weeks. But just be aware, Rantes is an inexpensive test. It's less than 30 euros. You can do that. And if it's gone up, you need to act. And this is a marker for retroviral activity that is triggered by either the COVID illness or by the vaccines. This brings up how to treat long COVID. And the most successful treatment that's reported now in medicine is the combination of both a statin drug, because statins are now known, really their main effect is that they're anti-inflammatory, specific pathways of inflammation that they're blocking, and it seems to be the same pathways that are activated by COVID or long COVID or post-injection COVID. And the other medicine that is hugely shining now is a medical antiretroviral agent, has a weird name, Maraviroc, M-A-R-V-I-R-O-C, Maraviroc. It's the generic name. There's different brand names. And this is for the physicians here. If you have severe cases, especially in children, children with autism had a downturn in the last 2 years, suspect that they have activated retroviruses. And so for the medical treatment for an adult is Maraviroc, 300 milligrams twice a day, and a statin in moderate doses, and then of course some coenzyme Q10 along with that. Then has been absolutely dramatic how it gets many of the children overnight back to their high functional state that they at one point had or even never had. And so that's the medical side of it. And of course, in terms of the products that we're using, it's all about skull cap, skull cap, skull cap, skull cap. And of course, the andrographis plus that remains our main tool. But skull cap is more specifically the treatment for retroviruses and repairing that with the retro V powder. And so, but my encouragement to you is this is not like in an adult a teaspoon of retro V powder twice a day, but in an adult it will be a heaping teaspoon 4 times a day of the retro V powder, and as much as tolerated of the skull cap tincture, and then a moderate dose of andrographis plus. So I wanted to get that off my chest because we've seen miracles from either way. And I have stressed in the past the political side that Luc Montagnier was the first one who pointed me personally out, Dietrich, COVID is all about the retroviral elements that are built into this virus from the place where it was manufactured. And Luc paid with his life for his discovery. And so I want to honor him also by pointing out it's no coincidence that now this has emerged as the main treatment, medical treatment for long COVID. But the point I'm trying to make here in the autism course is that pretty much, let me be honest here, there is nobody in the world right now who has not, maybe some tribes in the Amazon or so, but otherwise there's nobody in the Western world who has not been in contact with COVID. and whose body is not dealing with it in some way or another. And the autistic children are the most vulnerable to this particular coronavirus, if you want to call it that. And it's a gain of function, trained for destruction coronavirus. And so, but the piece in it that is deciding whether you overcome this illness, this virus, or not, is the retroviral section that's in there. And that needs to be addressed as if it was a retrovirus. It should not be addressed if it was a bacteria or a regular coronavirus. You know, this is a regular coronavirus plus HIV, basically combined. And so, not HIV with the idea to kill. And so, but what happens is similar to with HIV, and I want to stress it, and it has everything to do with autism. Similar to HIV, when after we've been exposed to the COVID-19, you know, whatever form and shape of it and mutation of it, what happens, we get through that piece of retroviral element, we get the typical immune suppression that is similar to AIDS. We call it AIDS minor. And then what happens is that all the infections that are in the child or in you will flare up. So the picture that we see in people is suddenly their Lyme disease is back with all the shades and facets that it had when you had Lyme disease. Or your Epstein-Barr, your chronic fatigue is back with the typical Epstein-Barr or herpes type 6 picture or CMV picture. Or your heart problems are back with the Coxsackie virus, or your bladder problems are back with the whatever the bugs are that were causing it. And you have to, in terms of symptoms of the patient, have to disregard COVID and everything. You have to treat it as you have learned from me or from others how to treat this individual illnesses. The patient really has that illness now, even though it was gone for 20 years or 5 years or 3 years or 15 years, and you thought the patient had overcome it. So please do not miss that. And they will also have, now, these are patients with a suppressed immune system, and most good tests for Lyme disease are based on a functional immune system. You know, so the Armin labs, you know, my friend Armin is also struggling with that, you know, sort of that the stimulation index, you know, in the test that you get, there could be just a 2 or 3, when really like the symptoms of the patient are suggesting there should be a 15. Or you may not even see the elevation of the lymphocyte activity, because it's especially the lymphocyte that get killed with COVID. And so when you have a Lyme patient, and when you have a long COVID patients, and you think this looks really like Lyme disease, and you do the test that we typically do, the LTT, ELISpot, and the other tests, and any of the tests based on the immune system may fail now to show the true nature of this illness. It will show it slightly, but not the full dimension of it. PCR test would show it, you know, if you do urine PCR or some other PCR test where you're actually looking for the live bugs. And so I just wanted to really bring that across from you and bring it back to autism. You know, if you treating an autistic child, or you have an autistic child, or an autistic teenager, or an autistic adult, and in the last 2 years, there was a worsening of certain symptoms, then please think of long COVID, you know, that there is that immune suppression that needs to be treated with antiretroviral strategies, either the natural ones in as high doses as you can get, or using the 2 medical drugs that I just suggested. You can also give those in children. There's been fantastic reports on that. And in addition to that, you treat the illness presentation that they have, you know, whether it's looks like a regular viral infection or pneumonia or bladder infection or Babesia, Bartonella, all that will flare up with it, and we see more and more of that. And It applies to your other patients, but it also applies to the children in trouble. Children that are now more compulsive than they were before. Children that are obsessed with doing certain things a certain way and not another way, or with food obsession about certain things and not other things. That's Bartonella. Yes, it is, but the Bartonella is flared up because of the underlying COVID that's there. And it's not the whole COVID, it's the retroviral part of COVID. And by taking that out, the whole system recovers and goes back to a nice recovered state. So I think that's all I want to say. Let me go find the PowerPoint and we go back. Okay, so tiny bit of review where we were, where we left off. So I don't know if the picture works for you. I have a weird sort of way that's presenting, but we talked about the artificial cloud making. In German, it's called Schleierwolken. That means veil clouds. And so you see very well that the chemtrails and the whole scenario has put a veil around the planet with dire consequences. You know, to remember the most dire consequences is the loss of water in the atmosphere and the desertification. That means many, many stretches of our beautiful Earth are turned into deserts now. Forests are burning down, and whole stretches of nature just turned back into nature, into deserts. And deserts take a long time to recover. And so the movie that I want all of you to see is called The Dimming, and by Dane Bigginton, The Dimming. And please watch it. If it touches you, please spread it. This is the most horrible crime committed not just to us humans, but to the whole planet. It's killing the insects. There's no insects. Songbirds all die. Ultimately, all the crops on the planet are full of nanoparticles of aluminum, and the worst thing may even be the plastic, the nanonized plastic particles that the aluminum is placed on, and the ingestion of nanonized plastics every day is just astronomical. People have estimated up to the size of a credit card, the size and weight of credit card. We're consuming nanoplastic particles every day, and this is, according to the real scientists, not from you throwing away your plastic bottles and plastic bags and then whatever happens to that. It is the spraying of the skies with plastic nanoparticles that then eventually fall down and get into everything. Okay, so I showed you the dramatic synergistic effect between aluminum and mercury. And so that means in the autistic kids, we need to dramatically detox both aluminum and mercury. Now, one agent that does both is coriander. The sulfhydryl affinitive detox agents like DMPS, DMSA, methionine, the sulfhydryl containing amino acids, all of them may address mercury, but not aluminum. Aluminum is its own animal. There used to be a medical drug, Desferal, that Mr. Bill Gates blocked in the whole US. I don't know how it is in Germany, but we talk in a moment a little bit about more about the detox agents. And this synergistic effect gets much, much worse if you bring testosterone in the equation. And by the way, also I showed you a few weeks ago that is now known that the ACE2 receptor that's needed for COVID to penetrate into the cell can be primed with testosterone. That means it's more willing to open itself up to the spike protein and to the virus material to come inside. So this is not the time right now to elevate your testosterone levels. It's time to keep it moderately low and get through this time. Okay, so here was the article from Mark and David Geyer that shows that you can cure autistic children simply by lowering testosterone, because then the mercury kind of tumbles out on its own. So let's go back one more time about a decent detox program that includes the Coriander Root Plus, which is really, first of all, it's a special growth of coriander that has the highest level of ingredients capable of detoxing mercury. That took a lot of research on our side to find out what the proper seed is that creates a plant that has the most active ingredients. And then it's combined with flower stem cells, which put sozusagen, it's like putting gasoline on fire. The transdermal melatonin is huge. Yeah, melatonin basically is the biggest overlooked healing agent in the US. You can get a kilogram of melatonin for $300 from bulksupplements.com. What has turned out to be a fantastic tool is, BioPure makes a suppository of 50 milligrams. But what we do in the rest of the world, in Europe, it's more difficult to get, because melatonin was patented as a medical drug with a little tweak on it. And then on the same day as the patent was granted, melatonin was forbidden for use in Europe. So there is a pretty available underground to find melatonin, but to get to the high doses that we're suggesting, 80 to 300 milligrams, is a bit more difficult. You can always inquire at BioPure, sorry, not US, but in the rest of the world, really, you can inquire with Key Science to see what the current sources are that are available. And that is a huge piece. We have gone another way. There is the research that shows that the main ingredient in propolis, called CAPE, it's a phenyl ester, has all the same properties as melatonin in terms of detoxing and stimulating different systems and antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal effects that we know. And propolis adds like a more potent antimicrobial side to it, but has the same properties in terms of the melatonin effects and binding cadmium, nickel, mercury, aluminum, and even glyphosate. So it's the optimum detox agent. And so we've gone more and more, instead of using melatonin, we use the Key Science propolis tincture, really like in terms of, maybe even a tablespoon in the morning and a tablespoon in the afternoon. Ideally, always we mix all the tinctures together so they're kind of diluting each other. When I use the straight propolis so it doesn't stick to the wall, I put it in a bit of water, and it creates like a milky presence. And if you want to put it on fire, you add a teaspoon or two of phospholipids of the microphos with it, and that turns this propolis into a phenomenal healing drink. The side effect is hugely involved with detoxing aluminum, mercury, cadmium, nickel, and all those things. And it bridges the sulfhydryl metals and the non-sulfhydryl metals. Chris actually recommends the acylis water. It's a high silica containing water that you can also get from Key Science. You just sign up, and then it's a water delivery that comes automatically from the company. It's really, we were surprised, how it lowers the aluminum levels over time in people. Then we're always concerned when we're starting an effective detox program, we want to route the mobilized toxins into the gut, not through the kidneys. However, we need to be aware that every detox agent mildly or moderately or severely damages the kidneys. And so to completely prevent that, we found that bear garlic is the ideal substance. Bear garlic has all the same properties as garlic has, plus at least 60, 70 other components that that normal garlic doesn't have. And bear garlic is a European plant that grows on riverbeds in the United Kingdom. It grows in huge meadows in Germany. And in fact, I grew up in Germany in a household where all the neighbors were ashamed. The rents were lower and the house prices were lower because it was surrounded by protected forests where were beautiful in the Rhine River estuaries. You know, they were there, so we had a lot of mosquitoes and everything. But in these estuaries, there was a blossoming of bear garlic every spring, and the whole town stunk of mercury. And so it actually lowered the prices of houses and everything. And of course, no one there, you know, this was a community of immigrants, you know, from Eastern Europe, all the Germans that kind of lost their homes in the Second World War were forced together there. And none of them, because it seems to be unknown in Eastern Europe, none of them knew, nobody knew that there's the most precious plant on the planet is growing right there and you should harvest and eat it. You know, that's the end of March, beginning of April. And so I popularized it in Germany amongst my students about 25 years ago. And now in a certain time of the year, April, May, June, it's on that menu in every restaurant, bear garlic soup and bear garlic dressings on salad and bear garlic this and that. And you can buy it now as a medicine from Key Science, you know, under the name Renolo. And it hugely protects your kidneys. Pomelo is the partner to that. Pomelo, the ingredients are groomed in a way with the selection of the herbs from different sources that it has the highest amount of mobilizing and binding aluminum. You know, and so if you trust me a little bit, you know, so the main contact point of aluminum is not your gut, it's your lungs. You're inhaling air that contains aluminum and plastic nanoparticles, and they get stuck in the surface of the lung, in the alveoli, and they create of course, they can create an immune reaction there that inflames the lung. Many of us have the chronic low-grade inflammation in the lung. And many of the people that got seriously ill with COVID, you know, where the oxygen went down to the 70s and they survived, and we had the chance to retest them afterwards. The most lung-affected people were the ones with the high lung tissue burden of nanoparticles of aluminum. You could find it in the sputum. You could send the sputum into the metal labs and find high levels of aluminum. Why am I the only one looking at that? You know, the chemtrail thing is so forbidden to look there, like it was forbidden to criticize the vaccines, like it was forbidden to look at the true origins of COVID, like it was forbidden to look at the true origins of AIDS and Lyme disease and all that. So just because it's forbidden to look there, it doesn't mean you shouldn't look there. Then there is a deodorant, it's called simply the Deo, that is not yet, but will be available at Key Science. It's a cilantro-based deodorant that I had available in the US for the last 15 or 20 years. It was designed by friends of my ideas of it. And the amazing thing with that, we had fantastic results with early breast cancer. You know, when women have lymph node, beginning lymph nodes that show up, or a tumor, you know, when it's still reasonably small. And we had several women with positive mammograms that then decided, instead of going straight ahead and having the tumors removed, to do like a wash and wait type of situation and use the cilantro deodorant, admittedly, you know, with other things that we know, the calcium deglucarate, the iodine, rubbing a bit of testosterone in the breast, all the modern things that we know that are anti-breast cancer. And we had dramatic results with that, you know, where a year later the mammograms were completely negative, completely fine. and women never had a problem again. Yeah, so it's a biggie that, of course, I don't know if it's even legal for me to talk about it. Of course, I'm not promoting it's a treatment for cancer. I'm just kind of saying it's a good deodorant that you should consider using, that is safe, that instead of putting aluminum into your chest, it takes aluminum out transdermally. Good, and then we have the binders, chlorella and zeolite. Both of them are excellent at binding aluminum to route it away from the kidneys into the gut. And then last but not least is the Key Science Detox Foot Bath. That's both frequency medicine. We put the specific frequencies in there for mercury and for aluminum and for glyphosate to shake that up. And then if you have the proper binders on board, you get a huge amount of extra excretion of those metals. Okay, so here's one of the many articles on melatonin providing therapeutic value against aluminum-induced oxidative stress and histopathological alterations. That means the brain in autistic children, we know, is different structurally. They have a smaller cerebellum and larger forebrain, and so on and so forth. And just with giving melatonin while they're still growing, it reverses back. These parts of the brain that are small grow, and the parts that are too big shrink. It's absolutely a miracle. So, and we have only one example, but we have good reasons to suspect that high-dose melatonin, high-dose propolis tincture is doing the same thing. It's not the propolis capsules. So that the propolis in capsules, the dry propolis, is very, very good in restoring your microbiome in the gut. It has mostly topical effects in the gut against pathogens, but actually nurtures the good bugs. And so it's fantastic for that, and has, of course, then huge effects on the immune system and on the gut-brain axis and all that. That's really good. But if you want to get into the system to take the aluminum out of the brain, you have to use propolis that's either dissolved in alcohol or in DMSO. Those are the only two ways of getting it. And DMSO tastes quite awful, and it's very, very difficult to get that into an autistic kid. But the alcoholic tincture has been very, very well tolerated. We're adding some galactose to it. That's the sugar that treats all autoimmune phenomena and downregulates that, according to Professor Ryder from the Charité in Berlin. It's a fantastic tool to make the different drinks and cocktails that we give children more compatible with them. This is from Margarita, the study. I'm not going to go over that again. That shows if you give people 1 dose of cilantro, and then followed by a foot bath for 30 minutes, that then we can monitor every couple of hours afterwards the aluminum excretion. We have other much more dramatic pictures. I didn't put the effort in, but when you see that after 8 hours, between hour 8 and hour 72, there's a huge increase of aluminum. It's the biggest increase of all the toxins is in aluminum. And I'm honestly, I shouldn't say that, but I because we're all inhaling this stuff every day. Just look at the sky, learn how to read it. It's like there is very, very few days anymore in the year, no matter where you live, where the sky isn't artificially sprayed. And that spray contains, yes, also iron nanoparticles and barium nanoparticles and titanium nanoparticles, but in much, much smaller proportions than the aluminum and the plastic, And so plastic, we have pretty good proof that coriander is also very, very active in detoxing plastic. So I'm suggesting that everybody should make that part of their household to have the right foot bath. And shy and pushing, can say, well, buy the one from Key Science. I know there used to be some some problems with the manufacture. To make it affordable, it had to be manufactured in China, and that is a difficult relationship. And some of you have been encountering that, when you got your product. But this is all sorted out. And the key piece with the foot bath is, please get the platinum coil, not the normal copper coil. The platinum coil, the frequencies are in there that you need to mobilize aluminum. And that's something, an adult should at least twice a week, you should sit down, put some nice music on, have your male partner add some warm water from time to time so it stays pleasantly warm for the half hour, and just enjoy this as a meditative thing that has a huge effect on your overall health. It should never be done without using a binder at least 24 hours before, but ideally every day. Okay, enough of that. So here's, in terms, we're shifting a little bit now towards mercury and the other things. So I want to just put this here right up front. So there's been a lot of bullshit discussions, sort of people saying, well, DMSA is so much better, or EDTA is so much better than DMPS. DMPS is shit, don't use it. Well, when you look at the studies that compare the different detox agents, I read you the conclusion here. The intravenous application of DMPS is most useful for the diagnosis of multiple metal overexposure. It's also the treatment of choice of AS is arsenic and mercury, and has the strongest copper binding ability of the chelators tested. And so they're comparing all the agents, and they're kind of basically saying, okay, well, they're all doing something, but DMPS shines. So in detox, I use zinc DTPA largely for lead, and I use for every other metal except aluminum, I use DMPS. For aluminum, I shared with you what I'm using, and then there is there's some stuff in the brain, that make it kind of complicated, because none of these chelators mentioned here cross the blood-brain barrier, at least not in sufficient amounts. We did some experiments by making the DMPS cross the blood-brain barrier, and both patients where we tried that got a seizure. And so we stopped doing that. So it's not suitable to work on the other side of the blood-brain barrier. You have to use the sulfhydryl-containing amino acids, and the big one is NAC. So I always combine now pretty much any detox attempt with N-acetylcysteine that crosses the blood-brain barrier easily and increases glutathione and other things in the brain. And we use melatonin or propolis with that, and that's when we get a good mobilization of stuff from the brain. There's one exception to all of that, that's gadolinium. Any one of your patients, or of you, whoever had a brain scan done where contrast was used, which typically is gadolinium, which is a rare earth. And there is now thousands of reports on the internet and in the scientific literature of people developing chronic neurological diseases, Alzheimer's disease, brain deterioration, MS-like symptoms, ALS-like symptoms from the use of gadolinium. It's a crime permitted to everybody, and the radiologists are completely ignoring their own literature. And so I took a deep search, because I had 2 of those scans done before I knew, and I listened in a scientific lecture in Baden-Baden where they recommended EDTA as a very weak agent, zinc TTP is a very weak agent, DMPS does not touch it. And so in the literature, actually, and I was surprised to find that it's cilantro is the ideal detox agent for gadolinium. And so I suggest to Inc., if anyone from Inc. or from Key Science is listening to my lectures, that we need a test vial for gadolinium. And it could be a low potency homeopathic, like maybe a D3 or a D4, 3X or 4X. And then every one of you should have that in a test kit. Do direct resonance of the brain with anyone who's ever had a MRI done of the brain or a CT of the brain, and you will find it a lot. And then, you know, the funny thing with that is, okay, you have, for example, a child with autism, and you suspect something wrong with the brain. Okay, then parents are told, oh yeah, the MRI is just radio waves and magnetic field, doesn't hurt the brain. So off you go and you get the MRI of the brain. But while the child is in that tube, you know, with the clunking noises, they get an IV line placed, and the nurse very peacefully injects the gadolinium. Oh yes, just a rare earth. Don't mind it. It's not doing anything. And the child very rapidly after that progresses with the symptoms of autism. And nobody ever thinks back to the gadolinium. You know? And these children need massive amounts of coriander. Parsley also has an effect. And I would have to say that there's a very impressive new product that Key Science has, is the parsley powder. You know, it's done in a special way that is highly absorbable, and parsley also contains huge amounts of apigenin, so it's one of our main cancer strategies. But it's also, parsley shares many of the same detox agents that Chinese parsley or cilantro has. And so we like to combine now the coriander tincture with the powder parsley extract. And usually the retrograde powder kind of travels along with it. And you know, some of the other powders, definitely the ascorbate, the complete ascorbate powder, and the antiviral powder. So the powders at Key Sciences are all tasting well, and most kids with autism like them. You know, you can put them in a little bit of apple sauce, but it's not been a big problem. So to summarize that, there is basically three categories of metals that we need to deal with. One is the mercury, lead, cadmium, nickel, barium. Those are the main self-hydroaffinitive metals that come out with GMPS. Whether you use it orally or as a intramuscularly or intravenously or as a suppository, I don't really mind. You can make a transdermal cream of GMPS that's very popular amongst autistic moms and dads in America to use it that way. That's one group of toxins. But the main, in terms of amount in us and importance of us, number one is aluminum, and aluminum responds very well to coriander plus the foot bath. My favorite form of magnesium for the kids is magnesium malate, because malic acid on its own is also a fantastic detoxifier of aluminum. The third one I should mention is citric acid. So lemons are great, and this is more for adults for the aluminum exposure, to squeeze a lemon into your daily water bottle and drink that. So that's another trick to get the aluminum down. And of course, the silica water, the acilis water. It's like in the Western world pretty easily available. Contact Key Science and they'll let you know where you can get the acilis water. Okay, so here's a little bit of my own work that was published in Explore, a paper that was more open to us alternative physicians. And so basically the title, I read it, mercury detox as a treatment for chronic viral, bacterial, and fungal illnesses. This is sort of the first official statement. This was 1997, where somebody dared to say the reason people have mold illness is the underlying level of mercury toxicity. And the reason why mold illness has become so popular now, because nobody has a good solution, because the mold becomes more aggressive and untamed in our system in the presence of mercury toxicity. And so when you treat mold illness, you should always include a strong mercury detox program. And that has cracked it. That has cracked the code on the mold illness. I know I'm not the most popular speaker because I have some strange ideas that I'm communicating, and my former friends like Neil, Nathan, or others have moved right to the forefront of mold illness, and with rather complicated treatment suggestions and expensive ones. And my treatment suggestion is pretty simple. Yes, use a binder. There's Russian studies that show zeolite is a better binder than cholestyramine for mold. And I hold very strong that you should treat the mold that's in the body instead of using the azole type drugs that generally are used. We use the ozonated plant oils, the rhizoles, fantastic results. And we do immunotherapy by using homeopathic dilutions of the patient's urine to reset the immune system compared in relationship to the mold. We also use autochemotherapy. And parallel to that, we detox mercury. I may, in my Seattle office life, we use a lot of DMPS, some DMSA, some EDTA, a lot of intravenous therapies to debulk the system of mercury, which has been a fantastic strategy. We have some absolute miracle cases for that, and all my colleagues that work with me in the clinic know how to use it safely. It's an orphan drug, so it's at least not illegal to use it. Often we combine it. It needs to be a little flush afterwards with intravenous ocean water or intravenous vitamin C. But when we deal with the chronic infections, remember Klinghardt's iceberg principle, that patient has symptoms, and when we scratch a little bit underneath the symptoms, whether they're psychiatric or medical, we often find a layer of microbes and infections and distorted microbiome in the gut. So it's all about pathogens and too little of the good bugs and too much of the bad bugs. But when we scratch a little bit deeper and look at why are they there, we find a whole layer of toxicity. And leading in that layer is now aluminum. Second in place is mercury. Third is lead. And then all the pesticides, herbicides, wood preservatives, all that comes later. And then there is a layer beyond that. Why are some people vulnerable, others are not? Yes, there is the genetics and epigenetics, but there is the psychological stress levels throughout life. When you had repeated long periods of stress, those are the periods when the sympathetics are activated. You cannot activate your parasympathetic. The detoxification is a parasympathetic nervous system activity. And if you're in chronic stress, the parasympathetics are decreased and the sympathetics are up here. And in that state, fight and flight, you're not detoxing. And so the longer the stress periods in your life were, the more time you had to accumulate toxins. And then the outcome of that is then you get the chronic infections and then you get all the symptoms of that. And so there's a lot to be said to that. And of course, when we look at what's causing stress, yes, there is your own biography, your own psychological events. There is the ancestral stress from your family that's passed on to you epigenetically. There is maybe stress from past lives and other existences. But the main stress today is not from that. It's from Wi-Fi, from cell phone broadcasting. And cell phone broadcasting creates a systemic stress response in the system. You can read that up from Marty Paul, who did really the best summary papers on this, but there's others now, voices everywhere. There is the swarming discussion about the cell danger response. But the driving force or mast cell activation syndrome, the driving force behind all that, those stresses is the Wi-Fi environment. And so we are killing ourselves, there's no question with that. Okay, how do we treat the mercury component? Yeah, we went through the aluminum, so now how about the mercury? So chlorella has been shown in numerous studies in China and Taiwan and Korea, is the ideal binder for mercury, for mobilized mercury. And half the content of chlorella is amino acids, and with a high prevalence of sulfhydryl affinitative amino acids, like cysteine, like methionine, and others, taurine, and others. And so by giving chlorella, you get two things. You get the binding effect, and you get the amino acids that are taken up in the bloodstream, circulating around and mopping up mercury and lead and nickel and cadmium and all that. And so it's an ideal tool to deal with that. But one warning, small amounts of chlorella bind a little bit of mobilized medicine, but already mobilize a huge amount of toxins. And so when you take small amounts of chlorella, you get a shock wave of toxic metals being mobilized from everywhere, but no binder to deal with it. So you get a redistribution of metals with all sorts of problems. Large amounts of chlorella don't mobilize anything more than small amounts. That is limited what comes out on a given day, but they hugely more bind the mobilized toxins and they don't get any problems. So what I'm warning you, when you use chlorella, please do not use 2 tablets 3 times a day. Use 20 tablets 3 times a day, right at the beginning. Don't tiptoe your way into it. You're going to get all sorts of problems that way. The other one is that in between the stronger detox days, especially when we use DMPS or DMSA, my DMPS protocol, maybe 2-3 vials of DMPS given in one shot, and then definitely more than once a month, maybe once a week initially for a few times, and then going to once a month dosing. Joachim Mutter, the main German toxicologist, says the average 50-year-old person that has no medical problems needs 125 vials of DMPS to get current on the sulfhydryl affinitive metal content in the body. So just keep that as a number, 125 vials of DMPS. When you get past that, you probably get into the therapeutic range of it. So of course we see results earlier than that, but it's like, we had this wonderful Russian patient. He's 96 years old. He's now actually, I think next year he's turning 100. Top fit, incredible sense of humor. He had these boils and blisters in his upper legs. It was awful, incredible pain, oozing out pus, and was really awful. He's been to every institution. And I diagnosed him with mercury toxicity and uranium toxicity. So we put him on the regular program of DMPS. And after 3 months, his skin was clear like a young man, and all the symptoms were gone. He's been through nightmares for 15 years through all the major institutions in the US, and of course nobody looked there. And so DMPS is a miracle drug for a lot of things. And so when we detox children, we have usually the DMPS compounded as a cream. College Pharmacy in Colorado has been leader for that. That's really easy for people to do. Once a day, you massage in an appropriate amount of DMPS. I'm not giving you doses here because that could get me in trouble legally. So you use common sense with that. And so what we like to do with DMPS, there's the DMPS day. It's usually not every day, it's maybe 1 day a week. And on that day, you do not give any minerals or electrolytes because DMPS would bind, the copper and the magnesium and the things in the mineral supplement and make it non-beneficial to the body. And so we're separating always the strong detox days with the time periods when there's no significant detox going on. And that's when we rapidly replace minerals using mineral supplements. So it's a rhythm between detoxing and substituting, detoxing and substituting. So, We use curcumin, has been published, and we show you the literature in a moment. There's a wonderful, effective detox agent for mercury, which is not a surprise. This other one, berberine, also has emerged recently, and they're both important, for general health reasons. They're both treatments for COVID, they're both treatments for EBV, they're both treatments for Lyme, and so so curcumin and berberine. Then the bedtime melatonin. See what you can get in the country that you are. So if you're in a country in the US, melatonin is freely available. We use the suppositories from BioPure. It's fantastic doing that. With autistic kids, they can handle the 50 milligram suppository. When they're really bad, we do it every day. Once they're recovering, maybe once a week. And so, but in between, we use the melatonin cream. And the rule, again, is more is better. We've never seen these things, the serotonin overdose thing that is so feared in the literature. We've just never seen it in 15, 20 years. Good. And then cilantro, in whatever doses are tolerated, is a huge help with the detox. Dr. Umura makes it's called MIC cilantro, which is fantastic. The little tablets of the active ingredients in cilantro concentrated. It's done at the university in Japan. And it tastes like peppermint, like a peppermint lozenge. It's beautiful. Put it under the tongue of the kids. They like it. And it has to be combined with drug uptake enhancement acupressure. It's the tip of the middle finger has to be massaged for 4 minutes or 2 minutes on each side. Usually it's the dad or mom doing that for the kids. So you take the pill while the pill is in the mouth and the kid is munching on it or swallowing it. You very, very strongly massage the tip of the middle finger. That's the brain representation area. And so the cilantro immediately goes there with wonderful results and published results on that. Okay, and then the imiramide, we hope that it's going to be available again. There's an underground for it. That's Boyd Haley's absolute superb detox agent for mercury. It's a powder. If you have access to it, check out if it's a real thing. If it's a real thing, it dissolves with the drop of the MSO that you put on there. The whole thing dissolves. If it does not dissolve with the MSO, it's a fake. Both of them come from China, the real thing and the other one. In the US, unfortunately, the special interests have completely blocked it. We had it available under the name OSR, oxidative stress relief, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. There was a cure for autistic kids, and of course, the FDA, as quickly as it got wind on it, forbid it. But it's available, but it's difficult to find. I know Dr. David Kennedy, the dentist in Southern California. He is allowed to use it and prescribe it, and there's probably other sources of it. But if I had an autistic kid, I would mobilize everything in the world to get my hands on imiramide. The dose, is between 50 milligrams is a very low dose. 200 milligrams for like a 5-year-old would be probably my average dose. And they can be combined with DMSA, at least one pill given at bedtime. Okay, and then we have the strategies to lower testosterone. The main medical one, the Lupron, is now, if you have the money, it costs like a couple of $1,000 a month if you do the daily injections from the Gaia protocols. That has been blocked by the FDA, so insurance no longer pays for it unless you negotiate with them. You can talk to them and show them the Gaia studies and say, you want to do that, you've exhausted everything else. It's still a lot cheaper than all the other failed things that people are trying. It's a daily injection with a small dose of Lupron. Okay, that's the best. But second to that, it's the use of spironolactone. It's a hormone that desensitizes the testosterone receptors. It's not really decreasing testosterone, but it lowers the receptors, and the kids typically do a lot better and it's not interfering with their sexual development. It's not with their sexual identity. It doesn't interfere with that. So spironolactone is typically given to teenage girls that get a lot of acne. It's a fantastic treatment for that, really with very, very few side effects. Now, some of the azole antifungals also lower testosterone, and the main one is the old ketoconazole, also known under the name Nazoral, that I use as my preferred antifungal. If I have other reasons to give antifungals, which in autism you always have reasons to do antifungals for a while, I like to, always, my favorite treatment that I learned from a dad, who lectured on this many, many moons ago, the combination of Valtrex and Thornox or Diflucan or Nazoral. The combination of Valtrex is important because when you kill molds, the same molds are infected with viruses and they release the viral material and the patient gets very ill. And so by anticipating that, you give a small dose of Valtrex twice a day and Nazoral twice a day, and you're lowering with that testosterone with amazing improvements that you get. The other one is high dose vitamin A is known to lower testosterone. And then there's other things like spearmint tea, also lowers testosterone. Reishi, the mushroom, lowers testosterone. So you can Google that, the testosterone lowering herbs, and there is a whole slew of them. And I think the elegant way for the homeopaths amongst you is just simply giving a C200 of testosterone. Of course, in America, is everything forbidden, but in other countries, you can get all the hormones and homeopathic dosing. C200. The higher the number is, the more it's the antidote to the thing that it carries the name for. And so I use that a lot. And that doesn't have to be given every day, but maybe every other day or twice a week. The C200 of testosterone will keep that level down. Yeah. And then, of course, the last one is the ionic foot bath, which also removes mercury from the system. Okay, so this is the famous paper that I wrote together with my then friend, Joseph Mercola, in a peer-reviewed journal that was very active at the time. Mercury toxicity and systemic elimination agents. This is where we're presenting these ideas, the cilantro and the chlorella, in a way with supporting it with the literature. And it's a review paper of all the strategies that other people have used. Okay, so a few final words on chlorella. So I attend a lot of autism conferences, and we know now that the setup for autism happens in the womb. That is when the mother is inflamed and has Lyme disease, or the mother has chronic viral activity or food allergies, and her immune system is in an activated state, that many of the cytokines that are upregulated cross the blood-brain barrier and creating the setup for autism in the child. And the easiest way to prevent that is to give the mom chlorella. And so here's just they use dioxin as a proxy for all those things. Dioxin is a very, very powerful toxin. And so they basically gave pregnant moms a certain dose of chlorella, a relatively small dose, I have to say, smaller than what I do. Give a small dose of chlorella and then checked at the time of birth in the umbilical cord how much toxic crap was in there, and showed that the chlorella dramatically reduced the transfer of toxins into the fetus. And so that is the strategy we've done now for 40 years. I'm very proud to say that I sort of discovered that, and Nakano followed my ideas when he did these studies. And we have this term in Germany called chlorella babies. The chlorella babies are happier, healthier, better looking than the non-chlorella babies. And we've never, amongst the chlorella community, that followed my advice closely. We never had a mom giving birth to an autistic child. There's been recently, there's been problems with COVID and the Wi-Fi environment, and that needs to be, of course, attenuated during pregnancy, especially the Wi-Fi has been horrible. And, when moms have infections during the pregnancy, that creates a lot of inflammatory cytokines that cross the blood-brain barrier and the placental barrier and are hugely affecting the development of the baby. If a mom has a fever during the pregnancy, that increases the chances of getting an autistic child by 30%. It's not a lot, but it's 30%. Remember, Tylenol is absolutely forbidden. And so the second study here shows that with chlorella, you can also detox the breast milk, which is maybe even more important. So it's the last third of the pregnancy where all these things happen, the transfer of toxins and all that, the inflammatory cytokines. And so it's usually the last trimester, where we have to be especially meticulous with keeping the infections down and giving chlorella to capture the cytokines and the infectious agents and to capture the toxic metals. So it's hugely, hugely important. So how much chlorella do we give in a breastfeeding mom? My instructions are, you start with 15, 20 tablets 3 times a day, and you go up until the breast milk gets a slight green tint. And that's the perfect breast milk that detoxes the whole baby, and you get these super babies. And I've been preaching this for 40 years, and unfortunately, very few people hear me on that, but the ones that have can testify to this. Okay, and then the last one, I think is important to see that the enhancement of natural killer cell activity through giving chlorella. Natural killer cells are hugely important and hugely suppressed by Lyme disease, by Epstein-Barr, by COVID, by everything else. And so it does more than one thing. Okay, and so let me see. I think we need to stop here. Next time we talk about a little more about eliminating all the rest of it, the complete picture. So the detox, we talk now about what you do for aluminum, what you do for mercury. You mix things together, the suggestions I do. And next time we're going to talk a little bit about glyphosate and some of the other things. And so with that, I want to say goodbye to you. I think we've stressed you enough. And until next time, bye-bye.